Hi, everyone. I'm Nadine Gilkison, and thank you for joining us this week for the Indiana GEG Launch Week. We've been really excited for us to be able to share with you guys some different free PDs that have been going on. And today I'm kind of wrapping things up with our Nailed It Google Slides Design Edition. If you are joining us, please post in the comments. Some of you might be on YouTube and some on Facebook. Make sure that you guys tell me who you are, what you teach, and where you are. And I know that some people may just be watching this, not on the live version, but it may be the recorded version, and that's perfectly fine too. I know that some of you may be in the middle of spring break. You may be getting ready to launch into spring break, and you know that you want to check this out, but you definitely may not be doing it right now, which is totally fine. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hop into things. So as I said, today we're going to be talking about Nailed It Google Slides Design Edition. And as I'm getting started with this, I wanted you guys to know that how I started using this was as a model lesson. And I used this model lesson prior to COVID, and it was really successful. And I actually miss getting to do this model lesson in classrooms. So the concept is that, of course, kids are totally into the show Nailed It on Netflix. And if you're not familiar with Nailed It, and I typically do show a official trailer of things that are going on so that people understand how Nailed It works. So basically they bring in people that typically do not know anything about cooking, and they show them these fancy cakes, and then they give them like an hour. They usually run 2 challenges during the show, but they give them that amount of time to basically recreate the fancy cake. And it's pretty funny, hilarious, and you get to learn a lot of things about cooking and baking at the same time. Because we all know that we'll find all these awesome things that are on Pinterest, oh, look at how great this is. And then people are like, yeah, nailed it. I totally bombed that one. That's not actually how it looks. So as I said, I used to do this out in classrooms, and I was scrolling through my pictures this morning and actually found an old picture of when I was in a school prior to COVID, and I was doing this. So I always hear people talk about being able to teach students different digital skills. For instance, we make presentations all the time. You have your students make presentations all of the time. But who's going to teach them the concepts that they need to have good presentations for different projects that they're going to do? I've even had some folks tell me, oh, well, maybe in my school, we might have someone who does like a tech rotation, and I'll just let them handle that. And my feeling is that it should be intertwined with something that you've already got going on in your classroom. So typically when I'm going out to classrooms and I tell them, hey, I'm coming to your school to do model lessons today, who would like to sign up? When I have my teachers sign up, the first thing I do is I ask them, what are you currently doing in the classroom? And when I was designing this model lesson, it was 5th grade I was working with at the time, and they had been doing some projects around books that they had read. And they were wanting to kind of tie in the 2 concepts together. We know that there's certain things that we need to see in student projects, but how can we, make it more engaging for the students to learn those concepts? So I said, well, what if I do a Nailed It concept idea? So what I did was I showed them the trailer, like I said, and got them all excited. And I said, before we start our actual event with Nailed It, I'm going to show you some tips to just give you a little bit of an edge. So one of the first things that I talk to kids about, because in my district we're one-to-one with Chromebooks, I talk about Chromebook shortcuts. Now this original graphic that I've actually modified and remixed actually came from Candy Tech Ideas on Twitter. And then I tweaked it to add some of the more popular items that I tend to use whenever I'm doing digital design. And honestly, it doesn't matter if you're on a Chromebook or not. You can use these shortcuts a lot. I kind of demonstrated to the students how to do some of these concepts, but I wanted them to have this as a reference to get ready for our challenge. At the same time, I was talking to the students about some different design tips. Rather than focusing on a barrage of tons of different design tips, I took the time to demonstrate to them masking images, basically how to alter a shape. I reminded them how to pull from the diagonal, color and font choice, thinking about a focal point, and layering. So I'm going to kind of go over, basically, I'm going to pretend like that I'm doing the model lesson with you all, and I'm going to give you some of those ideas. So I'm going to start with this image of this dog. And when I double click on it, I'm going to actually notice that it originally started out in this square shape. But a lot of people are not aware that for you to change what the actual image looks like, it's very easy in Google Slides. So as long as I have it selected, which I tell students even in kindergarten on up, I'll say, how do I know it's selected? And they'll say, a blue line with tiny blue boxes. And I say it, and then the kids actually repeat it back to me. So once it is selected, I'll hit this drop-down menu, and I can actually change that picture into any one of these other shapes. I tend to use the circle quite a bit, so I'm going to tap on that oval. I then can even go in and I can double click on it, and I can, tweak exactly how much that I want that to actually go in. All right. So masking images is one of the first things that I show kids that they can do. The next item that I talk about, which I bet you see kids do all the time, and honestly, I see adults do it too, is pulling from the diagonal. So with that, what I'm saying is that typically when a student adds an image, they're like, well, I want it bigger. So I'm just going to pull, down here, and then I want it to go over. Oh, wait, I want it to go over this far. No, I want it to go bigger. How about I want it to fill it? I want it to fill, the whole screen. So we've all seen presentations before that have the images where they are stretched out. And so I demonstrate for the students and I say, this looks weird, right? Okay, this does not look normal, correct? Well, first of all, if you make a mistake, I tell the kids, leave it selected, and it's okay. If you mess that up, then hold down Control and hit Z. And I'm going to keep hitting Z until I get it back to that original image. And then I show them, hey, if you want to make it resized and have the correct shape and you want to make it look normal, then I always tell them pull from the diagonal. Pull from any one of these diagonals. So I'm going to pull, I'm going to hold down and drag. And now this looks the complete normal shape that I want it to have. It's not going to look distorted at all as long as I pull from the diagonal. I then talk to the kids about color and font choice. So whenever kids are selecting color, and again, this is for adults as well, you want to make sure that your colors go together. And people typically like to pull in, I'm just going to pull in a shape here. They tend to like to go with a color that's from this top band up here, like a bright purple. I'm going to Control C, Control V. Then the kids tend to, they want to pick something that's really bright. They're like, oh yes, doesn't this look fabulous? And I'm like, hey, I know you love purple. I know you love bright, but let's take it down a notch because that's very hard on the eyes to see. So I show the kids, hey, you see how this is right here? Just come right underneath it. And this is what I like to call the muted palette. So now I've got purple, but it's definitely more manageable because it's muted. Oh, you love pink? Okay, great. I'm going to come right underneath it and I'm going to select the muted color of that. So I always want to make sure that they know that bright is not best. okay, if that makes sense. Another item that I like to talk to them about is font choice. We all know that the kids want to go out and they want to find, something that is, easy for them to be able to type in there, but they all love script fonts. Everybody loves those fonts. But what I have to explain to kids is that not everybody can read script. It's not easy for someone to read. And if a teacher doesn't have some type of a discussion with kids about font, then they're the ones that end up becoming punished later because they're trying to look through all these projects and they're like, I can't see that. And now I can't read that. So I talk to them a lot about what graphic designers do whenever they're thinking of creating something. And typically, whenever they're choosing a font, they're not going to stick with something that is scripty. They're going to pick something that's very easy to read. All right. Now, at the same essence, I talk to the kids about focal point. And I say, when you're driving in the car or when you see a commercial on TV, but let's go back to the car. You're in your car, you're driving down the highway, and you see a billboard. When you see the billboard, I want you to think of the concepts that I've just been talking to you about. Think of the color, think of the font choice, and now I want you to think about focal point. Focal point is something that we talk about all the time in, art classes and so on. And that's definitely key anytime that you are designing a presentation or a project. So you have to decide, what do you want the focal point to be? So if my dog is going to be the focal point, that means it should be the first item that my eye is attracted to. So every time that I design on slides, I always know that there's going to be a focal point whenever I'm designing on that slide. So having them understand what a focal point is, and at the same time while I'm talking about this, the kids are practicing with an image that I've already given them on a blank slide. It may just have one image of a dog, but we're doing like a quick little mini lesson here of me going over what this is going to do. So this is kind of a I do, and then we're kind of doing a little bit of we do at the same time. Now, with this process, the last point that I like to point out to kids is, I said, have you ever noticed when you see in a magazine or a billboard or something, they're really good about layering items, right? And so the kids are always like, yeah, I know, but I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, well, if this item is in back, but I wanted to have it in front, again, how do I know it's selected? And they'll say blue line and tiny blue boxes. If I say, if you want this in front of the dog, I'm going to hold down Control and Shift and the up arrow. So then they do that and it moves it to the front. And I say, you know what? What do you think it is if I want to put it to the back? And they're like, oh, I bet it's the down arrow. So Control, Shift, down arrow. I can tell you for myself, as doing a ton of graphic design, that shortcut I am using constantly. I use it all of the time. The other thing that I pointed out to them is when you're layering, you want something to stand out. And so coming in here to format options and then selecting a drop shadow is going to make that focal point stand out even more. And I can even manipulate it. So I'm showing the kids, ooh, do you want it to come out farther? Do you not like that angle and you want it at a different angle? So you can get creative with drop shadows and different things on Google Slides. So once I get to this point and I've done my little mini lesson, it's about 10 minutes of me showing them some of these little tips and tricks. Then I tell them, okay, you are being hired to design a campaign for an animal shelter or a rescue. You are going to get 15 minutes to create a slide. And I even had the teachers that told me, hey, I want them to know how to add audio. And so if that was the component that they wanted, then in that little mini lesson at the beginning, I would also teach them how to add audio, either with online voice recorder or the Mote extension. So when they get to this challenge, because we're getting ready to ramp up into the you do portion, then I'm telling them, I'm going to give you 15 minutes. Don't forget, you're hired to do this design campaign, but you also need to add audio for a radio commercial for the rescue. But I want you to think about those design tips that you've learned. Now, you notice with Nailed It, they always give them an example, right? So what I do is I project this onto the screen when I'm in there with the kids. And I just went out and I found campaigns that were designed. And one last thing before we get ready to start the timer, I kind of touch on the points that we had just done in the mini lesson. I'll say, ooh, take a look at their font. How about their color choice? Did anybody pick like some neon colors and things like that? What's the focal point? What do you notice is the focal point? And what you see as the focal point could be different from someone else. So since the students get a copy of this slide deck to use as a reference while they're doing their work, I then get ready to tell them, all right, we're going to start our 15-minute timer. And while the 15-minute timer is going, you can start exploring and you can start working on it. But then I tell them at some point, there's going to be a student in the class that ahead of time, when I was starting the model lesson, I've told them that they are the only one that can tell me that they're ready for the panic button. So basically, I get ready, I start the timer, and the kids start creating. And then at some point, this random student is going to get up, which I've told them, hey, I've already picked who this student is. They're going to get up and they're going to hit the panic button. And then when they hit the panic button, I'm going to remind them of some of those design tips, but I'm also going to tell them, hey, there's a bunch of other goodies that I've got in here too. So, hey, kids, if you want to explore any of these and use some of these items that you can. So here's what I'm going to do. In just a few minutes, I am going to start a timer. And again, I realize I've got some people here live, some people are watching this recorded. You may have seen, if you saw on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, I said I'm going to be giving out a prize, okay? I'm going to give the same prompt, and I'm going to say that you don't have to have it done by the end of this session, but what I'm going to tell you is I will type out my email, and if you email me an entry, then you could be eligible for a Breakout EDU kit. That's what I'm going to be giving away as my prize. So if you want to be eligible for that, then what you're going to do is you're going to try to do the same thing I do with the students, and you are going to design. You're going to design just one Google slide that's going to have this different information in here. When I do the 15 minutes, all right, I usually have this. Timer. 3, 2, 1, go, go, go. So I usually have this going during the entire lesson. So it's kind of like their little groove music while they're working on stuff. And that's perfectly fine. And then when the student tells me to hit the panic button, then of course I'm going to pause it. What I'm going to show you now, I'm going to kind of walk you guys through some of my other core for creating, but I want you to know that when I did it with the students, we didn't get all fancy into this. Could this lesson be adapted for any grade level? Absolutely. I'm serious. It could totally be adapted to any grade level. You could get into more complicated items that you're wanting to show kids. But I wanted you to really see this because this was from the actual lesson. And since you don't see her full face, I wanted you to go ahead and see some of the pictures that I took. And during that time limit, I walked by students' screens, and there were tons that I could have had, that I could have chosen. But what I'm wanting you to realize is that kids are quick learners. So this student, learned how to actually use like remove BG, because we talked a lot about using a transparent background versus having that white box. And the kids were all very eager to know, how in the world do I get rid of that white box? I thought she did a great job with her palette. Even though she has dark colors, we did talk about the concept of, if you're going to have a really dark background, then your text needs to be white and having that color contrast. I walked by another student that was using some images, and I really got excited because this student was incorporating in Google Slides shapes, and then they were trying to figure it out. They weren't even done with this, but I got so excited when I walked by that I really loved being able to see this. Something that I tell my teachers all the time is mentor tech. So whenever you're going to do like a quick little mini lesson on showing the kids how to do something, walk around, and as the students are working on something, if you see a really good one, snap a photo of it. You don't need to take a picture of the kid, just take a picture of the work, and then you can use that, just like I'm doing right now. I can use that to help students understand what it is that I'm looking for. So I'm going to kind of cover some of the other graphic design elements that I use, but keep in mind that if you want to participate in this little contest, that you guys can do your own little campaign and using everything in Google Slides. Now, I am fully aware that you could use Adobe Spark and you could use Canva, but this challenge is not using either one of those products. I want you to be using the design tools that are within Google Slides, because it's the same thing that I would be asking the kids to do for this challenge. So I'll take a moment and go over some of my most popular. A lot of people think that I take my own photographs and I add that to my presentations, which I'm totally flattered, but then I tell them I don't. So my number one that I use is Unsplash. It's actually an add-on that you can use for Google Slides. So literally, if I was doing something on a dog shelter, look at these amazing photos that I can actually already have in here. I'm going to go ahead and pretend like that I'm creating something. And I can go in here and select this picture of a dog. Notice it's already going to crop it out, but I can go up here and move it up if I want to just use one. Now, whenever, after I picked that one, or if I wanted to do the same concept that the other flyer did, where they had like 3 dogs, I could mimic that too. I could have this little guy in the middle. Oh, he's adorable. And I can, make different placements of different things that I want. If you have not heard it, a lot of people may not know, but whenever you're selecting images that you're going to have on a slide, you always want like an odd number, either 1 image, 3 images. If you get up into like 5 images, then you're pushing it. And I remind the kids of that because they go image crazy. Okay. So what I tell them is go back to your model. Okay. Take a look at what these graphic designers are doing. Oh, these 2 people have 1 dog. This person has 3. So they're following that rule. So I'll pick one more here. Oh, he's pretty cute. I'm going to pick him too. And so, oh, I thought I picked him. So then I'm going to go ahead and go with 3 and notice that as I'm creating, I am going ahead out there and selecting it. When I double click it, that's when I'm going to get those little brackets and I can move it so it's going to fit right in there. Now, this is something that I'm kind of picky about. Every time I pick something from Unsplash, it's going to give me this little gray line, and I immediately go in and select transparent because I like to get rid of that. Okay, so now I've got my 3 pictures. So I've really got like some major focal point, focal attention going on there. The next thing that I could use is icons for docs and slides. There's the link to it. But I wanted to show you guys it. So under add-ons, icons for slides and docs. I'm going to select start. And, you know, if I'm wanting to just get an icon of a dog, I can have that in here. Maybe I want to do a bone, a dog bone, because I've already got a lot of dogs on here. So it kind of feels like that I got a lot going on my page. And this is where you kind of have to have that ebb and flow. So if I'm going to use, 3 dog pictures, then I got to go kind of easy on my icons. If I decide to only have 1 picture of a dog, then maybe I want to use 3 like dog bones to have different icons in there. So when I add this in here, I typically like to go with the 512 because that's going to give me a bigger size, and I cannot stand it if something is pixelated. I'm obviously not going to leave it that big, but I like to, you know, kind of layer them in so that it looks like that it really fits with that picture. So what I'm going to do, let me come back here. I kind of lost my little thing there. Okay, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to go to format options. And again, remember that drop shadow. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of distance on that. And it's going to give me some great depth onto that. Now, the next thing that I could use is the color pick eyedropper. I use this all of the time. And let's say that I want my font. I'm going to be starting to type here. Let's go ahead and put that in there. I want it to be a certain color. Okay. Well, I really like this blue. I think this blue looks pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap on my color pick eyedropper. It is a Chrome extension, not an add-on. I'm going to tap on it, and now it's looking for hex codes on the screen. I found my blue. I tap on it. Now I'm going to select copy, close that out. Now, when I come back over here and I highlight the wording, I don't want it in black. I want it in that custom color. So now all I have to do is paste that hex code. Okay, so now I have that blue. So now I can use it in here. I'm going to put in here, help our dogs. Now on fonts, I've kind of on a trend right now. I typically like to use Lato. Now, when I give people design advice and I tell them, hey, don't use any more than 2 fonts, what I want you to notice is that if I pick Lato, notice the little arrow off to the side, and then it says thin, light, normal, bold, black. When I'm saying 2, I'm saying use 2 that are within that same range. So I like to go light when I start out, but I'm now going to make it huge. All right. So as I'm making it bigger here, I like to also throw in at times, you know, slanting it. Well, now I can rotate it, and I can decide if I want to have it on the side. Now, again, this is just me, you know, kind of working on the fly here. If I decide that I don't want that, this is where like the creator in me just starts to play around with it. Maybe I want it in bold. Maybe I say, you know what, I want it where it's normal. Okay. I can just, you know, continue to play around with that as I want to. But I can decide what I think is going to be the most eye-catching, because it's not just the picture that has to be important. It also has to be the information. So maybe turning it sideways isn't a good idea. Maybe I need to have it turned on this side. And I'm going to have that information right here. Okay. And if I'm going to have that information right there, then I probably want to have it spaced in the middle. And then as I want to take up the most room I possibly can, I'm going to go back one so that way it stays there. Now I'm realizing, okay, if I'm going to have that, then maybe I want to move my dog bone over here. So now I've got some information, but then maybe just like a little flyer tidbit that's going to go over here to the side. I can have something again in Lato, but if you remember, I was talking about contrast. So if I did a black font over here, it's not going to stand out. So I'm going to go extreme contrast and I'm going to go white. And let's say that I'm trying to tell somebody March 26th, and I've got information that I want to share out. So now what I've done is I can go in here and make it as big as what I possibly can. Align it over to the side. If you couldn't tell, that was bugging me that it was going into his ear. But now I've got it cohesive because I've used the blue from the blue in the picture. I've got my little text box here for that high contrast. I've got a lot of things going on, but it's easy to locate the information. If you want to record your voice, as I said, the Moat extension for Google Slides has become the new big latest craze, and it's really good. If you're on slides and you want to add animated GIFs, Giphy is a great one to use. But I always caution people to go easy on GIFs. Do I use them? Yes, of course. On this as an example, I tend to use no more than at least 2. I don't ever max out using more than 2 on a slide. But notice what I did. On the Giphy Chrome extension, I went out and I was like, ooh, there's coffee here. What would look really cool moving if this was going to not be a static poster and this was a presentation? If I search Steam, then that's what came up with this option. And then it looks pretty cool. So it looks like that my coffee is actually moving. I wanted people to know that these items are free. So I felt like adding that little eye catch, in there, I think is valid. The panic button. When I went out, I looked on Giphy for a panic button and found that in there too. So again, you're not just layering in tons of GIFs. You're purposely thinking about what purpose does the GIF have in the presentation. And again, showing kids that is important too. Do we have the Giphy Chrome extension open for students? No. We all know that it's also going to pull up inappropriate things, but I tend to show teachers how they can use this. If I was going to do a model lesson and there were certain items that I wanted the kids to have access to, I could vet and have certain GIFs, kind of like how I have my Chromebook shortcuts page. I could vet and have like 10 different GIFs on here, and I could tell them that they could use no more than 2 of them. That way they still get to use GIFs, but you're not giving them like a blind search for them to be doing it. Okay. I use Anyone with a Link Can View all of the time. It is by Alice Keeler, and it is a Chrome extension. Anytime I want people to be able to see my work, if you know me, I share everything I make on Twitter and everywhere else. I tap this button, and at one click, I now can change this presentation so anybody can use it. All right. Another popular one is Remove BG. If you're not as familiar with it, it's where I'll go ahead and click out here to it with it. So you can use it and you can add and upload to an image, add an image, copy, drag an image in there. And what it will do once you add the image is it will take the background away. So I talked to students about using that when they were doing a project. For instance, I was in a room, they were doing the Civil War. And since they were doing the Civil War, I was like, hey, you might have a picture of Abraham Lincoln in here, but wouldn't it look so much more cool if you could have it where he was a PNG, so it has a transparent background and you could layer it on like a background from the Civil War or something. Kids are very much into wanting to know how to do these items too. If you haven't checked out on the Canva website, they actually have a color palette item that you can use. So you upload a picture. So for instance, if I were to upload one of these Unsplash pictures, it would then generate a suggested hex code color palette that you could use, which is pretty amazing. And again, just doing just a simple activity like this, even for secondary students, you're going to love the work that they produce out of it, and you're going to appreciate it as well. Some other ways that I've been able to use this concept, the students were reading a book, and I said, okay, so you're going to design a slide that's promoting a book that you've read and liked, add a cover image, a background, 3 images, and audio. So just think about, what is it that you're wanting to get across? Have an anchor, like a sample. So that's tying in that nailed it concept. And then you can rock it from there. So I know I'm kind of winding down, being able to share these different tips. If I went too fast, don't worry. This session is going to be saved on YouTube. You guys anyone's welcome to join our Indiana GEG. You can belong to the group. All of our PD is going to be free that we host on there. We're trying to help as many educators as what we can. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel for Indiana GEG to come back and take a look at any of these recordings. So pause, go back, take a look at what tip that you needed again. In Facebook, in YouTube, I listed the link to get to this presentation. So if you want to use it, that's fine. I tend to project this in the classroom. So I'm not actually distributing like copyrighted pictures out to students. I'm using this for educational use only. All right, so I'm going to remove that. And if you guys have any other questions, I'll stay on for just a moment. Otherwise, thanks so much for joining us really this whole week for our launch. And stay tuned because we're going to be having more free events for our Indiana GEG. Thanks so much, everybody.